Välkomna till Stockholms stadshus och utdelningen av det 6:e vattenpriset. Ett pris som vill väcka världen till insikt om vikten av att värna vattnet. Ett litet exempel. När jordens befolkning fördubblas, ja då blir vattenåtgången 2,5 gånger större. Och idag har vi kommit till insikt om att vatten inte är en oändlig resurs. Idag hyllar vi professor Jorg Imberger från Australien. Och utanför stadshuset vimlar representanter för Stockholms stad och de företag som grundade Stockholms vattenstiftelse. Här finns naturligtvis människor från den vetenskapliga världen, från den diplomatiska kåren och naturligtvis här finns 1996 års pristagare, den 53-årige Jorg Imberger, som här samtalar med generalsekreteraren i vattenstiftelsen Bosse Krantz, som jag träffade igår för en intervju. För 6:e året i rad delas alltså vattenpriset ut och Bo Krantz 6 gånger nu. Vilken politisk betydelse har priset kunnat få?
En hel del tror jag. Det är framförallt någonting som har fokuserat världens ledares uppmärksamhet på vattnet som en ändlig och begränsad resurs. Och jag tror nog att man kan titta till exempel på Mellanöstern där ju uppgörelserna i fordom så besvärliga politiska läget med uppgörelserna beträffande vattenresurserna har kommit väldigt långt, och jag tror att det här beror en del på att vi faktiskt finns.
Mm. Inom den vetenskapliga världen då, vilken ställning har vattenpriset fått?
Så det är så här att det här är fortfarande det enda vattenpris som finns i världen av en global betydelse, och då är det här är det finaste man kan få om man är vattenforskare.
Mm. När vi talade vid första gången i de här sammanhangen då fanns ambitionen att vattenpriset det skulle bli någonting som var rätt nära Nobelpriset. Skiljer 6 miljoner idag, vilka möjligheter finns det att öka prissumman?
Ja, till att börja med så har vi väl kanske inte riktigt ambitioner att konkurrera med Nobelpriset. Vi försöker att i någon rimlig utsträckning vara oss själv nog i det avseendet. Nobel är så väldigt stort och prestigefyllt. Men jag tycker så här att det är 2 saker egentligen, ja det är 3 saker som gör att ett pris blir välkänt och bra. Det ena är då att man ska ha en fullständig självklar vetenskaplig integritet för det hela. Och det kan vi då genom Kungliga Vetenskapsakademins engagemang i det här garantera. Och det andra det är då att man ska ha ett avpassat prissumma. Det är kanske inte så viktigt, men mindre än $100,000 ska man nog inte ligga. Vi ligger på $150,000 och vi avser att höja det. Och det tredje är det att man måste kunna hålla på länge med det hela. Och alltså det är en funktion av hur många gånger man har delat ut priset. Och som du sa, nu håller vi på med den 6:e gången och det är ganska goda förhoppningar. Och när vi är uppe i den 25:e gången då är det här fullständigt självgående. Mm.
Du, när kommer ni att höja och hur mycket kommer det nya prissumman att bli?
Ja, det här är ju en styrelsefråga. Det är en sån här praktisk undanflykt jag kommer med. Men jag säger det att jag skulle tro att inom de närmaste åren så kommer det här att höjas. Och ja, det rimliga är väl egentligen att det går upp mot en dubbling.
I år så är det alltså professor Jorg Imberger från Australien som får priset. Varför är det just han?
Ja, det är så här att Jorg Imberger är en mycket framstående företrädare för sin speciella form av vetenskap. Och jag höll på att säga det är väl egentligen den enda internationellt riktigt kända. Jorg har förmågan att blanda kunskaper, alltså vetenskapliga meriter, både från fysik och kemi och matematik och flödesteknik och alla sådana här saker. Och så stoppar han in alltihop i de allt mera avancerade datorprogrammen som finns och drar vettiga slutsatser ur matematiska modeller. Och de här matematiska modellerna, de verkar ju som de ska vara fruktansvärt teoretiska, men det är de inte. Men de är faktiskt väldigt praktiskt tillämpbara, och det är makalöst att se vilken nytta man har fått av det där, både i laguner i Italien och naturligtvis i torra och flödade områden i det här. Det är mycket praktisk tillämpning av en utomordentligt teoretisk sammansättning av en massa olika parametrar.
Allt detta kommer fjolårets pristagare, britten John Lane, att tala mer om senare. Till tonerna av Södermanlands regementes marsch gör kungaparet sin entré i Blå hallen i Stockholms stadshus. Drottning Silvia, som ju har namnsdag idag, och kungen som är vattenprisets högste beskyddare, och så kungssång. Så sätter sig då kungen och därmed alla de inbjudna gästerna också. Generalsekreteraren i Stockholm Water Foundation, Stockholms vattenstiftelse, Bo Krantz, ska tala.
Your Majesties, Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Water is a marvelous substance. During the past 6 years, so many wise and learned things have been said precisely about water in connection with this annual event, the awarding of the Stockholm Water Prize. Water has always intrigued mankind, and we have come to at once worship, enjoy, and fear this remarkable substance. Like many of our common necessities, it has become increasingly difficult to have just the right amount of it. We just recently learned about the flooding in Korea, where more than 500 millimeters of rain fell more or less during a weekend. 550 millimeters of heavenly waters is just about what we get here in Sweden during a full year. TV showed pictures of roaring masses of storm water destroying anything man-made in its way. I came to think of Professor Paul Hermos and his institution, who were awarded the 1992 prize for their research, among other things, precisely on storm water handling. It also made me remember my own experience of a tropical storm when I visited Dr. Madhav Shitale, our 1993 prize winner, in Kerala, India. Rain was coming down in buckets, and windshield wipers were something our driver did not even bother to switch on, being completely inadequate in that kind of weather. Dr. Shitale did not bat an eyelid, and I have an uncertain feeling that he considered my concerns to be a bit of an overreaction. The fact is, of course, that tropical cities like Trivandrum are built to withstand such torrents using knowledge that modern engineers do not always calculate with, at least if we look at the effects in Korea. But lessons like that do not have to be quite so brutal. When I consulted Professor Kurt Forsberg in Uppsala regarding the work that eventually led to David Schindler's 1991 prize, I forgot to close the side window of my car. During the professor's learned session, an ample portion of Sweden's yearly precipitation occurred. Full of new insights, I returned to my car and sat down in the driver's seat, thereby experiencing water's penetrating capacity. In case of droughts or inadequate supply of water, the effects tend to be less instantly dramatic. WaterAid, the 1995 laureate, has a sizable operation in Tanzania. The relief even simple solutions can bring if implemented with a full cooperation and understanding of the end users was impressive indeed. We, who live in an area with 550 millimeter rain spread out pleasantly, have great difficulties in really understanding the full value and joy of 1 bucket of clean, fresh water. In a village outside Dodoma, John Lane and I were presented a live goat by villagers as a token of appreciation of what WaterAid had provided. It must have been a sight with 2 European gentlemen departing, leading between them an utterly well-behaved goat. It was a very moving moment, I can tell you. 1993 was an exceptionally wet summer in Stockholm. The day of the award ceremony, however, was beautiful. Just as we planned to take our seats for the dinner, I got the alarming news that there was a leak in the ceiling of the Golden Hall. I informed their Majesties that we had to wait another 15 minutes due to the unexpected event. His Majesty immediately looked out through the window at the waves glittering in the sun and said, "But it is not raining." We both contemplated the fact and realized whatever the reason was, it was probably something quite unpleasant, and waited patiently. And as His Majesty noted in his speech, there is a water festival going on out there, and you have to be prepared for the unforeseen. Swedes enjoy water. It's an indispensable part of our habitat, and we immediately look for the nearest aquatic scenery. So when Dr. Takeshi Kubo, our 1994 prize winner, gave a speech at the Tsukuba conference, he asked me if I had seen the big Lake Kasimigaura. I said yes, and made some remarks on the serene beauty of the lake. He then nodded and said, "Yes, so beautiful, so polluted." I think that Dr. Kubo already has been instrumental in changing it to the better. We are very privileged to have them all here tonight, the people that can change the water environment for the better. David Schindler, Paul Haremos, Madhav Shitale, Takeshi Kubo, and John Lane. Will you please stand up, gentlemen? And let us that are here give you a warm welcome.
De 5 tidigare pristagarna av vattenpriset.
And now, let us listen to some beautiful music before John Lane of WaterAid will bring Dr. Jorg Imberger into the distinguished line of Stockholm Water Prize laureates.
Och nu kommer alltså Harju-kvartetten att spela 4/4 Tango. Harry-kvartetten, for Tango, en kvartett som funnits i 7 år och som redan rönt stor internationell uppmärksamhet. Och så är det då dags för fjolårets pristagare John Lane från Wartrade att tala till Jorg Imberger och förklara varför han får priset.
Your Majesties, Your Royal Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would like you all to imagine that you own a lake. Indeed, some of you probably do own lakes, but the rest of you will just have to imagine it. You have big problems with your lake. The fish are dying, the water quality is getting worse. Pollution is entering from a river. The deeper parts lack oxygen. You don't understand how the water flows through your lake. You need help. Your common sense tells you that the problems may be linked to each other somehow. And so, it would be best to get help about all the problems from the same person. Unfortunately, this is not easy. Scientists tend to be experts in particular specialities, and so you may need to contact several different people to talk about your lake. In the future, however, it should become easier because there will be scientists who will be familiar with the full range of problems that affect your lake. This represents a significant change in scientific approach. The person behind the change is Dr. Jorg Imberger, in whose honor we have gathered here today. Before I explain the special contributions that Dr. Imberger has made, let me tell you a little about his career. He studied as a civil engineer in Australia up to master's degree level, before going to the University of California at Berkeley for his doctorate. Then, he became a researcher and lecturer at various universities in Australia and California. Since the 1970s, he has worked at the University of Western Australia as a lecturer, senior lecturer, and professor. For the past 15 years, he has been associated with the Centre for Water Research at that university, first as its founding director, and now as its chairperson. He does not confine his activities to academic work. He also plays a very full part in professional life, both in Australia and internationally, being a member of many organisations and a consultant or advisor to a large number of organisations and projects around the world. In describing to you Dr. Imberger's particular contribution to the water sector, I would like to highlight 2 points. First, his work on lakes and estuaries combines the study of physical, biological, and chemical processes. Most scientists concentrate on just one of these 3 aspects, but Dr. Imberger has studied them all together. His work shows how the physical flow of water affects the chemical composition and the biological quality of that water. Like so many good ideas, this sounds deceptively simple. Secondly, he is equally expert in theoretical calculations, laboratory experiments, field work on the actual water bodies, and in explaining his ideas to other people. This is a rare combination of abilities which has helped his work to have a major impact. Let us look briefly at the particular work that Dr. Imberger carries out. He worked originally on turbulence and hydrodynamics, the science of the movement of water. He measures motion at all scales, from a millimeter to the width of a lake. For example, he has been particularly interested in the problems of deep lakes, in which the changes in temperature mean that the water settles into different layers. The layers do not mix with each other, and so the deeper layers lose oxygen and become stagnant and unable to sustain life. Dr. Imberger has invented ways to mix the layers to prevent this problem. Dr. Imberger uses natural bodies of water as large laboratories. To do so, he has had to develop the instruments used in the work. Many of these are now commercially available through joint work between Dr. Imberger's organization and commercial companies. Dr. Imberger has translated his understanding of the physical, biological, and chemical aspects of water into a complex computer model known as DYRESM. I thought this might stand for, do you really expect simple mathematics? But in fact, it stands for Dynamic Reservoir Simulation Model. It exists in 1, 2, and 3-dimensional versions, each of which are suitable in particular circumstances. As with the measuring instruments, Dr. Imberger has worked to make this computer model widely available to other people. The mathematics of his work is extremely complicated, but he has the rare ability to reduce it to simple equations. I have found one to share with you. The characteristics of any particular lake can be expressed as a lake number, which we shall call L. If L is greater than 1, the layers in the lake do not mix. If L is less than 1, the layers do mix. To me, an equation that simple is the hallmark of a great mind. I hope these examples have helped to give you an impression of Dr. Imberger's work. I've tried to summarize it by finding a word that describes his profession. And so I have printed him a business card. And here it is. It says, Dr. Jorg Imberger, multiscalar, thermo, acoustic, physico, bio, chemico, hydro, dynamo, limnologist. And there aren't many of those people around. Dr. Imberger has been awarded the 1996 Stockholm Water Prize because he has made a major contribution to our knowledge of lakes, estuaries, and coasts. As we advance towards the 21st century, this knowledge will become even more important to us in trying to manage the ecology of our planet sustainably and responsibly. WaterAid was very honored to have been awarded the 1995 Stockholm Water Prize. The award of the prize brought WaterAid and its work to the attention of many more people around the world. The prize money itself was also very useful. We are using it to influence other organizations to put more resources into community-managed drinking water and sanitation in developing countries. I hope that Dr. Imberger will benefit from and enjoy the prize as much as WaterAid has. With his outstanding career and achievements, he has truly earned it. Your Majesties, Your Royal Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to join me in expressing your appreciation and your admiration for Dr. Imberger's work. Thank you very much.
Jorg Imberger får alltså ta emot applåderna. Till vänster om honom sitter hans hustru Barbara. Jorg Imberger är ingen smokingman. Men han såg ut att trivas rätt fint vid denna tillställning där vi nu ska få mer musik. Upp i trappan kommer röstorkestern Boys Boys och Harry-kvartetten sitter kvar. Och den som kommer ner för trappan är jag övertygad om att ni kommer att känna igen.
Så skimrande var aldrig havet och stranden aldrig så befriande. Fälten, ängarna och träden aldrig så vackra och blommorna aldrig så ljuvligt doftande som när du gick vid min sida i solnedgången aftonen den underbara då dina lockar dolde mig för världen medan du dränkte alla mina sorger. Älskling, i din första
Bergman och Boys Boys, så skildrade var aldrig havet. Vattenpriset är på 150 000 amerikanska dollars. I år betyder det någonstans kring 1,2 miljoner kronor. Och nu är det dags att överlämna prissumman och den tillhörande
Dr.
glasstatyetten.
Jorg Imberger, will you please come forward to receive the 1996 Stockholm Water Prize from the hands of His Majesty the King.
Och kungen är alltså prisets högste beskyddare och också den som delar ut den. Jorg Imberger, som kommer från Österrike men flyttade tidigt till Australien. Delar av arméns musikkår spelade den specialskrivna vattenprisfanfaren skriven av Mats Kärnhagen, som också leder musikkåren. Jorg Imberger har fått ta emot diplomet. Hans hustru har applåderat och sett lite rörd ut. Kungen fortsätter att gratulera, och där ser ni också en glasskulptur som följer med priset. En varm och mycket hjärtlig applåd. En populär pristagare. Water Dreaming, Tim Wheater och Gary Thomas.
Matilda, you come a waltzing, Matilda, with me. And he sang as he watched and waited till his billy boiled. You come a waltzing, Matilda, with me. Once a angry swayman came by his billy bone under the shade of a coolibah tree, and he sang as he watched and waited till his billy boiled. You come a waltzing, Matilda, with me. Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you come a waltzing Matilda with me. And he sang as he watched and waited till his billy boiled. You come a waltzing Matilda with me.
Waltzing Matilda till 1996 års pristagare Jorg Imberger, Boys och Gary Thomas. Det kommer att bli dans senare under kvällen för Jorg Imberger och alla de andra nu generalsekreterare.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the 1996 Stockholm Water Prize Award ceremony. The Majesties will now leave. Will you please rise and remain standing until the Majesties have left the hall?
Nu ska ni få träffa årets pristagare. Jag mötte honom igår mittemellan skärgården och Mälaren. Omgivna var vi alltså av vatten, och jag konstaterade att här i Sverige så tar vi bra vatten för självklart för det mesta. Och så frågade jag honom om han tyckte att vi var bortskämda. Och så här svarade Jorg Imberger.
Yeah, it's a very interesting comment because you have to put that into context. Things look very beautiful, and I live in a similar sort of situation in Western Australia where the Swan River flows through the city, and it looks very beautiful. So people say to you, well, you know, why is there a problem? Why are you worried about things? But I guess underlying the surface beauty, sometimes there are some pretty severe problems. And I guess the other thing you have to remember, you can be very proud of your record here in Sweden in terms of looking after your water resources, but you have a relatively small population. You have ample water resources, so there's not a lot of pressure on your water resources. Whereas if you go to countries that don't have so much water and have a much more developing population, like for instance Malaysia or Indonesia, so forth, that's where the real problems come out. But you know, traveling from an aeroplane from Copenhagen to Stockholm, looking down at some of your lakes in the southern region of Sweden, I think you also have some perhaps pending problems.
What kind of problems?
Well, you can see that there's a lot of algae growth in the lakes, which means that probably there's a lot of nutrients coming in from the agricultural sector. And talking to some of my colleagues here in Sweden that I've met through this opportunity this week, there seems to be a general awareness that nutrient enrichment is a fairly major problem for Sweden.
Mm. Could you take any dying lake and make it a healthy lake again?
Yeah, you have to put that question into context, perhaps, because what is a healthy lake to you may not be a healthy lake to somebody else. For instance, healthy for drinking purposes is one thing, healthy for fisheries is another thing. But I think that the answer from a technical point of view is yes. We now are beginning to understand, we being in the broader context of scientific research generally, that we know how to start manipulating these water bodies towards an end which is beneficial to what you're doing. But I don't see the same thing happening on the political side or in the financial side. So in other words, if you give me the political will and a reasonable budget, I think the answer is yes. I don't see that will or political impetus being there generally in the world.
Do you think that it ever will?
Well, it's an interesting question, I guess, because if the pressure becomes severe enough, and as you can see in the past, for instance, in California, now in the Middle East, water is really the currency of the local politics. And as the water resources become more scarce, and the sort of predictions are in 50 years, there will be many countries running out of water, then of course it will gain in importance. And instead of haggling over land rights, territorial questions, you probably see more and more problems emerging because of water jurisdictions.
I remember speaking to Dr. Chitale, one of the former laureates, a couple of years ago, where he said that he was convinced that the lack of water will start a war somewhere in the world in the future. Do you agree?
I guess from my way of thinking, wars are an outmoded concept in this world, because the war at the moment is a physical conflict, whereas I think there are much more subtle things happening through information technology. Countries are gaining in influence, the powerful countries, perhaps you could list Japan, Germany, and the United States, without actually fighting a war. That's a much more subtle thing, and I think there is a great danger that the water issue will lead to a bigger power play, but I don't think the physical conflict. Perhaps isolated small events, but I don't think major events.
Do you think that we ever will be able to guarantee every man on earth good, healthy water?
Well, your question is somewhat foreign to me, because I don't think it's your right to have this water. Nature is there to be not just exploited, and the question is really very much an engineering 1950s, 60s philosophy, because there, in those days, you know, the modernist idea that we can exploit to our heart's content.
So what's the question of today?
The question of the day, I think you have to basically reduce your expectations in the developed countries, be much more sympathetic in the underdeveloped countries, and reach some sort of balance. And also, I think, generally, we have to have a reduction of exploitation, a reduction of expectations. Now, that's going to be very difficult to do, and it requires an enormous education program. But I think the idea of providing everybody in the world with the sort of water resources you have in Sweden is not realistic.
No.
So the whole concept of a sustainable world brings with it almost a false sense of hope. I don't see any way, no matter how efficient we get, that we can, as the population expands, the rate it's still expanding, that we can give everybody the Swedish standard of life. It's just not physically possible.
And you don't think that we can stay with the standard we have today either. So in what way should we reduce the use of water?
Yeah, the arbitration of this, of course, is very difficult, because the people who have it now are very reluctant to going to give it up. Probably it'll involve some sort of bartering process, in the sense that one country may not have certain assets that another country has, so you have to barter the resources. But the biggest problem with the water, of course, is that it's available in certain areas where there are very often no people. Like in Western Australia, we have an enormous amount of water in the north, 3,000 kilometers away from where it's used. And you'll probably find in most countries, like Bangladesh, has enormous amount of water, but at the wrong place and the wrong time sometimes, and it's very difficult to harness. So the big engineering challenge will be to harness the water and bring it to where the water is needed. That alone will cost a fortune, but it can be done technically. So as I said before, if there's a financial incentive, so I think politically the biggest thing that in the environment generally is that politicians have to provide an environmental incentive for us to achieve the sort of things that you're advocating.
Last mandatory question, what will you do with the money?
I knew that this was going to come. I've given this some thought, not a lot, but I would like to do something which is something special for the and for the Stockholm Water Foundation generally, and it's very hard to think of something where the money will not just be added to another source of money. So one of the ideas I've had, which I like more and more, is to perhaps put together a book on environmental engineering, bringing out the sort of philosophy that I'm very keen about. And also I'm a very keen photographer. So I've gathered over the last 30 years what I think are some nice photographs, and sort of a pictorial book with a simple message to show the general public what sort of things can be done, and also to look at this question that they have to reduce their expectations.
Exciting. Looking forward to see it. Thank you for
nice
joining us.
talking to you.
Water is a marvelous substance. During the past 6 years, so many wise and learned things have been said precisely about water in connection with this annual event, the awarding of the Stockholm Water Prize.
Cheers.
We are very privileged to have them all here tonight, the people that can change the water environment for the better. David Schindler, Paul Harrimos, Madhav Shitale, Takeshi Kubo, and John Lane. Will you please stand up, gentlemen? And let us that are here give you a warm welcome.
Your Majesties, Your Royal Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would like you all to imagine that you own a lake. Indeed, some of you probably do own lakes, but the rest of you will just have to imagine it. You have big problems with your lake. The fish are dying. The water quality is getting worse. Pollution is entering from a river. The deeper parts lack oxygen. You don't understand how the water flows through your lake. You need help. Your common sense tells you that the problems may be linked to each other somehow. And so, it would be best to get help about all the problems from the same person. Unfortunately, this is not easy. Scientists tend to be experts in particular specialities, and so you may need to contact several different people to talk about your lake. In the future, however, it should become easier because there will be scientists who will be familiar with the full range of problems that affect your lake. This represents a significant change in scientific approach. The person behind the change is Dr. Jorg Imberger, in whose honor we have gathered here today. Let us look briefly at the particular work that Dr. Imberger carries out. He worked originally on turbulence and hydrodynamics, the science of the movement of water. He measures motion at all scales, from a millimeter to the width of a lake. For example, he has been particularly interested in the problems of deep lakes, in which the changes in temperature mean that the water settles into different layers. The layers do not mix with each other, and so the deeper layers lose oxygen and become stagnant and unable to sustain life. Dr. Imberger has invented ways to mix the layers to prevent this problem. I hope these examples have helped to give you an impression of Dr. Imberger's work. I've tried to summarize it by finding a word that describes his profession. And so I have printed him a business card. And here it is. It says, Dr. Jorg Imberger, multiscalar, thermo, acoustic, physico, bio, chemico, hydro, dynamo, limnologist. And there aren't many of those people around. Dr. Imberger has been awarded the 1996 Stockholm Water Prize because he has made a major contribution to our knowledge of lakes, estuaries, and coasts. As we advance towards the 21st century, this knowledge will become even more important to us in trying to manage the ecology of our planet sustainably and responsibly. Dr. Jorg Imberger, will you please come forward to receive the 1996 Stockholm Water Prize from the hands of His Majesty the King?